Okay, we're back. We're going to be learning now about staining. A lot of times students ask about how to stain their wood projects to change the color of the wood. Staining is not necessary. Yeah, I must admit, I think I'm biased about it in that I'm biased against it. I feel like if you have gotten a really nice piece of, say, walnut, it should look like walnut. If you got a really nice piece of maple, it should look like maple. But if you want to change the color of your wood, then these are the options that are out there. We don't have all of these at school, but I want you to be aware of what these are. First of which that I have here is a deck stain, or an exterior stain. You could use this on a fence, you could use this on outdoor wood furniture, you could use this on a deck. I'm going to go into this much deeper in a separate video about exterior wood finishing, but for right now we'll put this one away and we'll see some of the others that are for more interior projects. The ones that are the most common are the ones over here. These are oil-based wood stains, and there's different brands. Minwax is probably the most common one or the most popular, but they're all kind of the same. But you can also get really weird colors. This is a navy blue. It's not even a wood color. And then, you know, this one has a name, Provincial. And you can see stain cans always get stained because that's kind of what stains do. They just kind of get all over the place. So this is not going to be a very neat process. It tends to be pretty messy. But these are our oil-based stains, and we're going to see those first. Related to oil-based stains, but kind of a different animal, is water-based stains. I like the fact that these are water cleanup. We don't have to deal with the nasty chemicals that are in an oil-based finish, but these generally just don't work well. They don't look good. And so water-based stains are never my first choice. Then lastly, over here, we have a dye. And a dye is different than a stain. Stains have pigment particles. This is in a liquid form. They tend to give very, very crisp looking colors, but you could also get really weird colors that are not wood colors. This one is actually lemon yellow. And so if you wanted your piece of wood to look a little more yellowy, then that might be a good way to go. These also can just be dissolved in water. So they're pretty non-toxic. It might be a good way to go if you were wanting to use this for something that was going to be, say, on like a kid's toy. You can make something yellow or any other color, because they come in a ton of different colors and they last forever. They can be a bit expensive. You can see this one was $21, but I literally will only use a few drops of this in a cup of water to stain something. So they really last a super long time. Okay, let's see some staining. I have some little wood samples here, just a couple of them to use as a comparison. I also have a rag, and I have stir sticks. And for applying them, you can use a brush, you can use a rag, whatever. I'm going to actually, because these are just little small samples, I'm using glue brushes because they're disposable. So to start off with, when you go to use a stain, let me find one that actually is kind of full. Yeah. Okay, well, this one actually is kind of full. I have a paint can opener. You could use a flat bladed screwdriver, and you just kind of work your way around the perimeter, opening that up. Okay. So I just removed the lid from this can of stain, and if you look, it's goopy in the bottom, and that's because you always need to stir a stain. Sometimes people want to shake them. In general, if the finish comes in a can, it is not something that you should shake. The reason is, once you put that onto the wood and you brush it out into a thin layer, then all the air that you shook into that finish starts coming out, and you end up with little microscopic bubbles all over your finish, and it looks terrible. So I'm gonna thoroughly stir this, off camera, and then we're going to come back and we're going to put some of the stain on. You'll see how to stain something. Okay, that should pretty much do it. You can see that there's not big chunks, big blobs of the solids on there. It's all kind of evenly mixed. I also stirred up another stain that's more a wood color. This color is a golden mahogany. So we're going to see what those look like on these 2 scraps of wood. Speaking of these 2 scraps of wood, if you're going to be doing some staining, it's a really good idea that you take scraps of wood that are the same kind of wood that your project is made out of, sand them the exact same, and then if you have multiple ones, you can actually try different amounts of stain and staining for different time periods on those scraps before you put it onto your actual product. So for starters, I'm gonna put this on. There's no incredible art to staining. You get it on the wood and you want it to stay wet for about 15 minutes. The longer you have it on here, the more it's going to darken the wood, but you start losing a lot of that increased intensity that you might expect. So in other words, if you put the stain on for 5 minutes, yeah, it's going to change the color of wood, and it's going to change the color of wood more if you have it on for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, but it doesn't get proportionally darker. It's not like if you put it on for twice as long, it's going to be twice as dark. But you can see what I've done here is I've really put it on there quite heavily. It's wet, and I'm going to keep track of that for the next 15 minutes. If I see it starting to dry in some area, I'm going to put more stain on. Let's take a look and see what this other one would look like too. You put that on there and you see it's more of a brown pigment, and actually this stuff seems to really soak into the wood maybe a little bit more. Both of these are oil-based. I greatly prefer oil-based stains, but honestly I prefer no stain over that. I really just like clear finishes, or finishes that let the wood kind of speak for itself, I suppose. And so I'm going to put that on, and I'm going to keep applying this over the next 15 minutes. Every time that it starts to look a little bit dry in one area, I'm going to keep putting it on, and brushing all around, making sure that it stays nice and wet. And then after that 15 minutes, then we're going to come back and we're going to wipe these all down and try to remove as much finish as we can with a rag, and then it'll be stained. Okay, so our 15 minutes has gone by, and you can see they're still both pretty wet. I've applied more stain a couple times to them, and we got our brown one, our blue one, and I have 2 rags. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I want to rub as much of this stain off as I can. So I am using all sorts of directions that I'm kind of going in a little swirl, removing that finish. But in the end, what I want to do is I want to wipe with the grain. And I have to confess, I did a pretty terrible job at sanding this. I was just trying to put together a quick demo for you. But if you look here, I don't know if that comes out on camera, but there are little scratches all over the place. It looks terrible. So the more you sand that, the better it's going to look. Still, it doesn't look that great. I would maybe want to restain this some more just to get more of that blue color in there. And you can tell that maybe the sanding wasn't that even because it's lighter around the perimeter and darker in this area. But that's how you stain something. Now I do have this rag that has some of this oil-based stain on it. It has a little bit of mineral oil from a previous demo. This is an oil-soaked rag. Oil-soaked rags are dangerous. They need to be allowed to dry away from combustible materials. So I'm going to lay this out on my lawn and let that dry. If I were to throw it in my trash, it could combust in the middle of the night and self-combust and burn my house down. So you want to make sure that you let these oil-soaked rags dry away from everything else and dry on their own. Let's take this stain off this one here. Again, I didn't do a great job sanding. I can already see that. But I'm going to really get all that stain off of there. Stain takes a long time to dry, so if you left it pooling on the top, then it's going to really take a long time to dry before you can put any kind of finish over the top. Neither one of these pieces of wood are done. They are not durable at all. If you thought that this was going to be the finish that you might put on a stool, a table, whatever for inside, this won't work well because it is not a protective finish whatsoever. You need to make sure that you actually that you put something more durable over the surface of it. I always have students asking me about using wood filler, and I really don't like wood filler, and I'll show you why. I've taken this piece of wood and it had a scratch in it, and so I put some wood filler in it. There is also a hole here that I put some wood filler on, and then once that wood filler dried, then I sanded it. Not very well, but I sanded it so it's flat. And now I'm going to put stain on it. And what I want to show you here is that no matter what, you might find some wood filler that says it's for the type of wood that you're making your project out of, but it is never ever going to look like that wood. If anything, what they tend to do is they tend to actually make it more obvious. So if you're trying to hide something, it's going to do the exact opposite of what you want. So I would just strongly encourage you to stay away from wood fillers. If you have a crack or a hole, or you're trying to fill, say, a little bitty hole left by a nail or something like that, leave it. Or maybe make a wood patch, an actual, where you remove a piece of wood, say with a router, and then you can glue in a small little piece of wood exactly in that spot. But this will end up highlighting those, and I'll show you that in just a moment. Okay, so it's been 15 minutes here. We've got our piece of wood that has been stained after it's had some wood filler on it. This is a typical wood filler job right here. And so you can see that it made that scratch more obvious. Maybe it's a little bit blended in down here, but it highlighted the edges of this hole, so that is a little more obvious. That's just so typical of using a wood filler. Now, I will say there are other products that after you have finished, after you've completely put finish on your project and it's all done, you may decide, well, okay, I do have this scratch, I want to cover that up. There's products that then are kind of like crayons. They're wax sticks that you can put on, and maybe you could match it really closely to the wood grain that you have. You'll have better luck with those because you're putting on something that doesn't change color, and it is after your wood has changed color. In this case, when you put on this wood filler stuff, it's going to change color, and it's going to change color differently than the wood, so it always ends up looking terrible. That's it. Now you know how to stain.